So I want to begin by saying that I acknowledge that there are so many groups of people who have experienced exclusion in the church. And I have knowledge about some groups of which I'm not a part. And I've gained this knowledge by way of a combination of just curiosity. First of all, I love languages and words, and I'm always wanting to know about other people, what they eat, what they, what's funny to them, what they like to sing. Anyway, so I'm just curious about people. So I've learned about people because of that curiosity and learning and reading, and also relationships. And with all that said, I believe it is safe to say that my own experiences could give us insight on the experiences of other people. However, I will focus on the specifics of what it's like for me as a Black woman in a white church. And because of time, I can't go into great depth, and because we want to and need to make this time fruitful together, I won't attempt to speak about all the other groups that we could name in our struggle to heal racism. In 2011 rather, I was the rector of an historic Black parish, and that parish was comprised of African Americans and then various West Indian, Caribbean island people who were first generation and second and third generation, and in the Diocese of Michigan and Detroit. But in that place, and I should also say that Detroit is the blackest city in the United States. But I was the only Black woman rector in the diocese, and there had only been one Black woman rector before me at another parish, and she only lasted for like 2 years. And there have not been any since. Yes. And actually, one other Black woman ordained to the priesthood since I was ordained in 2005. Yeah. So in my community, when I went to ecumenical meetings, I was usually the only woman in attendance. I would gather, there were a bunch of other churches, and actually my church was located on what was called Piety Row. You could walk, a few, we took up a block, and then the next block there was another, and they're just across the street, churches everywhere. And in these ecumenical meetings that I would participate in, occasionally there might be another woman there, but nobody that was in charge of a parish. And then I'd start saying something, and they'd look at me like I was crazy. So, the loneliness was compounded by also then the invisibility I felt when I tried to contribute to discussions and possibilities for ministries in our community. I was also wrestling with my experience of what it meant to be a Black woman and a priest in a predominantly white denomination. Because the other ecumenical settings, they were just they're Black people, but the Episcopal Church in the Diocese of Michigan, even though the see is Detroit, it's very, very white. In 2014, I completed my doctoral work, which was a study of Black women priests in the Episcopal Church, and it's like, not even like 4% of all the priests. And this work was instrumental in me deciding to stay in the Episcopal Church. The title of my dissertation is Black Women Priest, a Womanist Agenda for the Episcopal Church. And I will explain that womanists are Black women of faith. And womanist theory holds that Black women thrive when they have and create communities of support and validation. And the thing about this is that their uplift, it's people might think, well, is a Black feminist or a womanist? They are very different, but very similar. So for a womanist, their uplift benefits them and the people whom they love and are responsible for. So that means then that Black women priests are in a unique position as they lead from the margins. And, it's interesting to be, so the people that I've always been responsible for don't necessarily look like myself. And most womanists are, working to lift people that are like themselves, that look like them. But that's not the case for Black women priests in the Episcopal Church. Well, maybe most of them, but for some of us, it's just not the case. So I conducted my research using a mixed methods approach, gathering data through interviews and measurable data. And the most important and encouraging findings that I found were Black women priests reported their love of the ideals and vision of an inclusive church. We love that. And each of us tries, well, I guess I'm still a priest, but at the time I was, and each tries to do her part to lead the church in being and building beloved community. This research also clarified the values of these women's lived experience. As the church continues to strive for meaningful inclusion, we must look to those who help us embody the diversity we say we desire and which God has inspired us to seek. These people are the experts on what it means to be included and valued, and will help us make the changes that we need to be an inclusive church. And one of the greatest personal learning and discernment that came from my study and research was embracing and intentionally doing what I've been doing all along, searching out the other in our communities and developing relationships. And it was then that I began to name my ministry of otherness, I called it otherness, and vowed to no longer avoid the vulnerability of being the only one. So this winding path has led me to discover the peace and grace of embracing the discomfort of being other. I knew that part of my call was to step out of the relatively comfortable zone of leading people who look like me. Being other has become an essential practice of my continued growth. This vantage point gives me a particular gift of discernment and understanding about inclusion of all God's people and our church's commitment to this work. Becoming beloved community is not a destination or an accomplished goal, and instead it is a constant transformation and revelation of opportunities for relationships, the work of reconciliation, and ministry. So as I considered my call to be Bishop of Vermont, I wondered what it would be like to live in a place with such a small African-American Black population. But I knew I was supposed to be there. And this is, I guess, Holy Spirit, I cannot explain it, but I've never felt more at home or like myself in my ministry. And now that I'm bishop in Vermont, I'm certain that there was just something mystical about this immediate connection that I had with my people and they with me. As I interacted with the people of my diocese and learned more about them and their ministries, there was an ease and confidence I had never experienced before. And I did not intend to have racism as a top priority for our work, but the issue has risen to be a top priority for us. There were already churches in my diocese engaged in book studies about racism and finding ways to support social justice causes through migrant justice networks and Vermont Interfaith Action and the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. However, this type of engagement was primarily expressed in helping relationships, not the kind of relationship one might have with a colleague or someone who is in charge. And so when I first came to Vermont, we missed an opportunity to do some groundwork when I arrived. And I'll talk about this in a later talk, though. And I will briefly say, we discovered that attention to inclusion and belonging is essential work that we need to attend to so that we can have healthy and productive interactions between, have good and healthy interactions between members within our diocesan household, but really, there's just me. There's me, and I had a canon who is African American, so he's a priest in the diocese. I brought him to the diocese, and almost 2 years ago, it'll be 2 years. Is that today? Maybe it's today, is their anniversary. A black woman who's a priest in the diocese, but she's actually canonically resident in Massachusetts. So, this is about relationships between, all the people and me. So, I understand that you've dedicated 3 years to racial reconciliation. But in the world we inhabit, realistically speaking, this is work that will outlast those of us who are under the sound of my voice. It's going to keep going and going. I do believe in miracles, and I also know that God often involves us in miracle making. When you go to your World Cafe conversations, I'm wondering then, as you go, how will you take this into your planning for your vision and priorities? And I think that I probably ended a little sooner than you were expecting.
You mean talking? You finished talking?
Well, I want to give people an opportunity to ask questions before, because I've been talking a lot. So, anyway, do you all have questions for me? And I'm also curious, because I'm looking around the room, and I don't have this sort of diversity in my diocese. And so I'm always, whenever I'm somewhere else, I just love to soak in the various people that are gathered. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity to be able to just look at you. Yes.
Vermont does have black population. Wait, Penny, microphone coming to you. Coming.
Vermont does have black pop
Oh, yes, they do.
population. What denomination, and do you interact at all with any leadership in other churches?
So Vermont, and I'm going to talk in the next talk, I will give some actual numbers, but in the Episcopal Church, probably, 2 hands, spread around, and most of them there's some in the South. And then the other thing is that in Vermont, our black population are not mostly African American either. And that's very different. There's people look at us as a monolith even in the States, they do that anyway, and in the church. And then you get into, if you have ever led a black congregation like I have, that a black congregation, if it's, like I described, African American and people that are West Indian, and even within those groups, there's all sorts of diversity. So, and I'll just tell this little story. During the pandemic, early on in the pandemic, right when we got vaccines, and we were trying to get vaccinated. My husband's older, and he's white, so it was easy for him to get a vaccination. I am younger than him, but because of my work, I'm around elderly people a lot, and I'll talk about those demographics in the next talk. And so, I need to be protected. And it was very hard for me to get a vaccine. So then they, the government, the state, advertised BIPOC clinics for vaccinations. And so, I started to look into it, and my cathedral hosted the vaccinations. There's a picture of me in there, even. I have a seat in there. It's a cathedral. So when the vaccinations became available, you couldn't go online to get one, to register like everyone else. You had to call on the phone. And there were, I don't know, it was maybe 1,000 vaccinations for all the BIPOC people. So yes, I was on the phone, and I was angry, and I used some language that I'm not, okay, maybe I'm proud of it, but I won't say the things that I said here. And I said, this is ridiculous that you have only a handful of vaccinations for all the black people to fight over. And there were a few other people that were included in the BIPOC clinic. But so you're going to have us fighting like crabs in a barrel over how to get vaccinated, and then you don't even have, you're not using technology for us? As if, what? We don't use a computer? So it makes it much more difficult. You're on the phone, and it was very frustrating. And I said, so this was just about optics, to look like you've done the right thing. You have a BIPOC clinic, and then you have the nerve to have it in one of my buildings, and I can't even get one. And the other part of the story is that the African community is organized, and they had their own clinics. They had been getting vaccinations for, several weeks, about 3-4 weeks before African Americans could. We were not included in that. And there was a connection, the government worked with them, but did not work with African Americans. So I will tell you this, cussing does have its value because it worked. Suddenly there became, about 1,000 more vaccinations that then were made available, and I was actually able to get one. But that's, it's it's shocking. So it's an odd thing. People are not used to. They're not used to African Americans in Vermont. So it's interesting. Go ahead.
Bishop, thank you for being here. And you mentioned about not knowing us too well, and it wouldn't be. I hope you get to know us more from these couple of days together. But it's really interesting being here, being the white people who speak English are in a minority, which is unusual for North America. So, but I don't think that the white people who speak English have always been a great minority. And this institution represents some of the not greatness of what we try to mean by white British Isles Anglophones. And my question is actually similar to my colleague. And I just love the tone of the way you started our gathering here. And there's been a lot of work. We're in a time of change where Bishop Mary has announced her retirement. There's a lot of things changing right now. And quite a few people have done a lot to make this synod a place where we're having real conversations like this World Cafe, like what we're having right now. When you look out at other Episcopal churches, other British Isles churches that have the same challenge of there are black people in the state, they're diverse people in the area, but they're not in the pews, and they're definitely not clergy, and they're definitely not bishops.
Right.
And I can confess I was critical of I'm starting to just lose my mind if I see another photo of our House of Bishops for our Anglican Church of Canada that is as white as it is. And photos of who runs our theological training, super white. As you have those real conversations, when are we going to just let go of the differences between denominations that are so darn similar that could be coming together in a better way? Is that something you talk about? Is it a crazy dream? Is that part of the solution?
So I think that the thing that made us do it have those sorts of conversations as Episcopalians is because of church decline and desperation. And so, we talk about a clergy shortage in the U.S. And so, all the relationships that we have with other denominations, like the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, the Moravians. Funny, I was just talking about that this yesterday morning. I can't remember the list, but there's a list of them. And, some of it is just being practical, I think. And that sometimes will get us more exposure, I found. Because when I was in the Diocese of Michigan, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, ELCA, as we call it, they were more diverse than we were in their clergy leadership. So there's some examples there. But I know that that's not why we're having these conversations, why we're connecting. And we still, I talked about helping relationships. That is the preferred way, thinking of like mission trips, going places, and we do this work in the community, and it's, loving our neighbor, but, as long as the neighbor is not, and I hesitate to use the word on the same level. I don't want to say it. I don't like to say that because I don't want to participate in that. But if we are having real relationships with people that don't look like us and they're in the same status, that's much more difficult. Much more difficult. Class, crossing different, classes, that's not as hard because there is still a place where people don't get to enter. Yeah. I don't know if that's answering your question or not, but.
Back at the left, Alex.
Yes.
I have two kind of related questions. The first one is, before you became a bishop, and I mean, you did doctoral work on the experiences of Black women in ministry in the Episcopal Church, and how did you find the experience of speaking out about the negative experiences that you had? Was that sort of a big threat to power? How did you, I guess, find the courage to even do that? And then my second question is, for people in this room, I don't even have the ability to vote, who have very little power, what can we do to better work for inclusion from our own places on the margins without any power to do it?
Yeah, it's interesting because, you notice I said that study is how I ended up staying in the church because it was it was maddening. I was ordained with 4 other women, and one of them is African American, and one is a lesbian. And this group of 5 of us, when we were ordained, people shook their heads because they're like, oh my goodness, they are not like the rest of our clergy. I also had a little tiny child who, at my ordination, she was very tiny, and I had to nurse her during the service. And so the way I approached my priesthood was that, look, all of me is coming into this call. I'm not going to make myself smaller, even though people continually try to push me down, make me smaller. And also that group of women, when we were ordained, at our ordination retreat, and it was only us that were ordained that summer. And we were given materials to read. One of the articles was titled, "The 7 Deadly Sirens of Ministry." And I thought, wow, sirens, huh? Okay. And then another article was Chrysostom, and he said something, I can't find the reading anymore. I don't know, it's gone. But it said, he said something like, well, you know, women are, you can baptize them, and maybe then they're okay. And then another article, all the references to ordained people were he. So we sat down for a discussion, and I said, and you know, the five of us, we talked, and can you believe it? Oh, we were angry that we were given those kinds of things to read at a retreat. And we were even told when we tried, we were all excited. We thought, oh, wasn't the church excited with us? That we found our ministry and we're going to do all this great stuff. And then we had all these ideas for our ordination. And one of the people who was leading the retreat, we let him know, oh, can we this, can we that? He says, look, this is not your coronation. I was like, oh. So we were told very early on, stay in your place. And we didn't. And at the retreat, so it was time to discuss the articles and the readings, and I said, okay, wait, I'm sorry, I can't hear anything you're saying. I can't hear anything. Because all I can hear is these articles telling me that I'm not good enough. That's all I can hear. He, you know, it's been a while. He finally stopped apologizing for having given us that. So, you know, that was the beginning, and I just sort of, you know, put that, oh no, it's not gonna, you know, it's gonna be okay. But as I continued to do the work that I was doing, I just didn't understand how it is that because we stand out so much in me, how could I be so invisible? How could I never be asked to do, you know, certain things, or the work that I was doing not noticed? And it wasn't about me. For me, it was hurtful because my people, my parish, you know, we were doing amazing ministry, but no attention, no support, no encouragement. And I just thought, okay, God, this is your thing, so you're going to have to help me figure this out. And so it was hard to speak up. And I used to be, there was a time when I was much more vocal about things, and then when I wasn't, because I was tired and I couldn't keep doing it. So the study, I also wanted us to not just, yes, we needed to vent, and we needed to complain, we needed to have that, but also, you know, I said appreciative, because appreciative inquiry is an actual thing where you build on those strengths and those things that you know that are good, and make those bigger to crowd out the other, you know, the stuff that you don't want. And so that was the approach in talking to the other Black woman priest. And so I interviewed women from Africa, well, African descent. Well, they were, you know, immigrants from Haiti, from a bunch of different other West Indian, Caribbean places, because actually there are more Black women priests of Caribbean descent than African American. So I had to broaden. Initially I thought, oh, African American, I don't want, you know, too big a group, but no, I had to include anybody that's Black, any Black woman priest. So that was, you know, what the focus was. And for all of them, they had similar experiences. And it was very hard for us to be considered for positions to do other things besides lead Black people. But if the rest of the church never sees leadership that looks like what we're aspiring to be, then it's not going to happen. And so around that time, I was having conversations with other women, because also women, you know, wasn't like women were allowed to be ordained to the priesthood when I first thought I wanted to be a priest. I didn't know. I mean, nobody, I mean, I just thought, oh, I want to be a priest. I want to be an artist. I want to be a ballerina. I haven't been a ballerina, but I've done the other two. And my dad is a retired priest. And, you know, he never said you can't be a priest, but the way that he led, I saw women with him at the altar, and I didn't, you know, make the distinction between him and them because they were there with him serving. And so I thought that that was something that I could do. So that was a thing that I had to see. And so then if a woman is going to be in, you know, leadership that is, well, these words, higher leadership. I hate these, you know, because we are a hierarchical church, so I can't, you know, get past that. But we started having conversations about how do you prepare yourself to say yes to some of those things, because we knew we needed different experiences in order to be able to move into different types of leadership. And so I was in a colleague group with other black women, but we were part of a study for another woman. She's a white woman, and she was studying, you know, how to help women be prepared for higher leadership in the church. And we you know, had retreats, we would read, and I was the chaplain for our group. And in my group of colleagues, Bishop of Colorado, Bishop of Chicago, and they were in my colleague group. Another one who is, she's a dean of student something or another at Berkeley Divinity School. And so we, you know, took this approach of of not just having like certain learning, but also spiritually, you know, how do you prepare yourself for that type of leadership and supporting each other and discernment. We were supported by other women bishops in particular who, you know, would, you know, mentor us and tell us, yes, you know, I think you're ready. That was, you know, what one bishop told me. She says, Shannon, you're ready. I said, ready for what? Because I never thought I was going to be a bishop. I did not want to be. But she says, you're ready now. I said, I don't think so. And I said, because, you know, there's a ladder. You're supposed to do this. You're supposed to do all these particular things before you can do that sort of thing. My path was a little different. But I did, you know, end up doing some other higher leadership experiences. And the other piece of it was that I had to make a choice in my, you know, with myself. If I'm going to be in other types of leadership in the church, I have to be able to be in places where I'm leading people that don't look like me. So I sought out those sorts of experiences. And so my next call after being with just black people was a parish, well, cathedral in Indianapolis. And about a third of that congregation are Latinos from different, mostly Central American countries. And so we had a bilingual experience there. But it was just really making myself vulnerable. And that is also a spiritual practice, I believe, as well. Trusting God. Did I cover all that? Oh, and then how do you, someone without power, I don't know, you just keep speaking. I don't know, you just keep saying what's on your heart and on your mind, and saying the things that you know others are not saying. If that's what comes in your heart, then it needs to be said, and sometimes it means finding the courage to do that. And for me, that was a hard thing because I'm introverted and shy. So I, okay, God, it's up to you.
Hi, Bishop.
Hi.
My name is Dion Lewis. I am the co-chair of the Anti-Racism Task Force of the Diocese of Montreal. And thank you so much for what you said. And it's interesting how there's a lot of resonance of trying to be a leader of people that don't look like you, and how you want to find all those experiences in order to give yourself confidence in order to be able to continue doing the work that you're doing or the work that needs to be done.
Mm.
But being a person that is on the edge of society, care needs to be taken also to really put yourself out there. Like, shy. Normally, I don't say much when I usually normally don't say much. But when something
I
needs to be said,
resonate.
when something needs to be said, all of a sudden you just have to like gird up and get it said. That requires so much strength. So every time we have to step out and force, it takes an effort. And then you need to step back for a bit to gain back your energy. That's speaking from my experience.
Oh, yeah.
How do you continue to recharge your batteries in order to continue doing the work? Because it's a work that does not stop.
You know, that's hard. I have to say that I have a hard time with that discipline. Although, when I talk to some of my colleagues, you know, they have visitations every single Sunday. They'll go to some place on Saturday. They go to multiple places on one day. And I won't. I refuse to do that. And so some of it is it's talking to yourself and saying, you know, I don't have anything to prove to others, even though they're expecting it. So it's a really difficult balance to allow yourself to be who you are and to know that you have to take care of yourself in order to do that. And so Sabbath, you know, that word is a real thing, and to keep, you know, drumming it into oneself that this is a spiritual practice, this is about me and God. I can't just keep ignoring that. And then being, you know, some self-awareness about what are the signs that I'm not taking care of myself. Like the other day, my calendar, actually today, right now, yeah, I'm supposed to be at Rock Point School giving diplomas to our high school students. But because of things that I had been dealing with for like a year and a half, really difficult things, and I knew, like, over the last 2 months, I'm getting to my point, to a point where I need a break, I need a break, I need a break. And so I said, ooh, well, when this opportunity came up, I said, yay, I get to go play with Mary. I'm going, I am gone. I can't wait. Yes. Look, anytime I can see, I'm sorry, but and I love my people, don't get me wrong, but anytime I can see people that are, you know, a mixture of people in the same room, it really feeds my soul. Even though I'm introverted, it's like, well, it does, it helps. So I couldn't.
It's an invitation from the Lord.
It was. And so I said, and then I was trying to, you know, sort out in my mind, how can I this, how can I do all that? And I just said, no. I told the head of school, I said, you know, I'm sorry, I just can't. I need this. I need to be somewhere else. I need to be able to actually talk about these things, because this is coming sort of at the tail end of some really difficult times that we've had in our diocese. And so I did this for myself, even though I do realize, ooh, you know, I had reached the limit. You know, forgetting a calendar thing that's that big, that's a real sign that I'm tired, even though this is a refreshing time. And so, you know, sorting out with myself that People are going to wonder, well, why isn't she coming sooner? And why isn't she going to this place or that place? That's their problem. You know, I'm saying it easily, but sometimes it does bug me. I also, my canons are really good about, I mean, we've talked and they know they need to tell me, okay, Bishop, you know what? You need a break. I think maybe you should say no to this particular thing, or, no, I'll go and do this other thing, or how about if I, you know, contact this person for you, and how can I be helpful? Because I've seen the calendar, and I know that you spent a lot of time over these last few weeks and haven't really had your Sabbath day. So, and it's on the calendar, and I'm really fairly strict about it. I don't answer emails past 9 or 10. I mean, 10 is really, it has to be an emergency. But clearly, I know that there's an emergency because apparently I've been checking the email, right? If I know that there's an emergency at 10. So, you know, there are times, though, and I have 2 phones. One is my, I mean, we don't have like a landline. 2 phones. I mean, these are real practical things. The one phone is my home phone, and it's here, so home is here. And then the other phone is my business phone. When it's my Sabbath day, the business phone, I set it down somewhere in the house and walk away. And I don't pick it up. Rarely. Only time I pick it up is if I know that there's something that I'm waiting for from somebody, but I won't answer people. There are all kinds of apps that will tell you and remind myself to answer this email next week at 2 o'clock. Don't answer it now, because this is your time. You need it. Take it. So find all the tools. I mean, just, and you know, try different things to see what it is, because it really is a physical labor. It's and mental labor, spiritual labor, this kind of work. And so you do have to take the time to replenish and honor your body. And that part of honoring your body is about honoring God, ultimately.
Victor David Mboyi Bipungu. Thank you, Bishop, for being there with us. My question is very simple. What can you tell us about fear in your life?
Fear?
Fear, yeah. At the time of your discernment, before being a bishop, were you sometimes scared? Have you taken advantage of this? How?
Yeah, so last night when I was preaching, I said something about embracing all of your emotions. And that is one of those things, you know, shame is one that people don't like to embrace. Fear is another one. And, you know, when I go on to my greater glory, I'm going to talk with Jesus a little bit about fear and, you know, and the angels saying, oh, don't be afraid. Don't, you know, be not afraid, fear not. You know what? Too bad. Too bad if you're afraid. It's okay. Because it's there to help you take notice. What am I supposed to be noticing when I'm afraid? What am I supposed to be noticing? What's going on around me, in my surroundings? Is it me, you know, is it just me? Is it uncertainty? Is it is it a lack of confidence? And so what I've done with fear is said, okay, it's there. You're not feeling great about this situation, partly because maybe you don't know what it's going to be like, you know, how you're going to be received. And, you know, I just notice it and take it as a practice that, okay, this time when I went and did something when I was afraid, I didn't die. It was okay. My deodorant didn't give out. My stomach finally calmed down, and it was okay. And so it just, continuing to practice that and, praying and, okay, I'm afraid, I'm nervous, and being very aware of it.